Okay, everybody, it is time for news and views from the Nefarium on Thursday, November 9th, 2012, the year of the apocalypse. And if you've been following the American presidential selection, the apocalypse appears to be a little closer as we had choice between Barmit Obromniak and Barmit Obromniak, and of course Barmit Obromniak won. I might be talking about my take on the presidential selection. I don't know. I haven't made up my mind. I'm quite frankly bummed out about it. But more importantly, during the presidential selection, in the 2 weeks prior to it, we had some really, really interesting news that kind of was swept under the rug. So I want to talk about that if I can. 3 articles but I'm going to link to this news and views from the Nefarium, one from Zero Hedge, another from the CNN Money Watch, and then a final one. All right, so let's start with Zero Hedge. The article in Zero Hedge points out that now Ecuador has joined Germany and other nations calling for a repatriation of its gold bullion. All right. Now, Ecuador's gold reserves are very, very tiny compared, of course, to Germany's. They have about 26.3 tons of gold, and in the closing words of this article on Zero Hedge, it says, quote, because Ecuador, with its 26.3 tons of gold, may be small in the grand scheme of gold things, all it takes is for more and more banks to join the bandwagon and demand delivery in kind from official repositories, Edam Est, New York, and London. And the myth that is the over-collateralization of hard money by central banks will promptly come to an abrupt and bitter and quite likely violent end, unquote. Now, that's a very interesting comment for Zero Hedge to make, because what they're saying there with over-collateralization is the same thing I've been arguing throughout some of these blogs about the state of the world's gold reserves. And that is that this gold has been rehypothecated over and over and over. In other words, one reserve was used to float several different issues of securities, loans, and so on and so forth. In other words, the system is fraudulent, and the central banks have been willing and complicit players in the fraud. And now Ecuador has joined the call for repatriation of gold reserves. Germany doing so, as I have argued repeatedly, is very significant, because that's an indicator that one of the major key economies within this New World Order scheme has broken, that there is some serious factional infighting going on. And I'll be blogging a bit in the coming 2 weeks about some other moves that the central bankers are putting into play to try and stave off what is now facing them. Now let's turn to another article by CNN Money. And this is a very short article. I'm actually going to read this one to you. It's entitled, Stock Certificates Feared Damaged by Sandy. All right. Now I want you to pay very close attention to this. It says, quote, trillions of dollars worth of stock certificates and other paper securities that were stored in a vault in lower Manhattan may have suffered water damage from Superstorm Sandy. The Depository Trust and Clearing Corporation, an industry-run clearinghouse for Wall Street, said the contents of its vault are likely damaged after its building at 55 Water Street sustained significant water damage from the storm that battered New York City's financial district earlier this week. The vault contains certificates registered to Seed & Company, a subsidiary of the Deposit Trust and Clearing Corporation, as well as custody certificates in sealed envelopes that belong to clients. The Depository Trust and Clearing Corporation provides custody and clearing service for more than 3.6 million securities worth an estimated 36.5 trillion, according to the website. At this point, it is premature to make an accurate assessment as to the full impact of the water damage, nor would it be helpful to project on what specific actions need to be taken with respect to our vault. So, in other words, Hurricane Sandy came at a peculiarly convenient time, and I have a suspicion here. I'm going to crawl out on a limb and speculate a bit as to what this might portend. If we accept the fact that there has been some wholesale fraud within the Western financial system, this would be a convenient way to erase the paper trail of some of that fraud. Now that raises the question already that some of you out there are speculating that Sandy was such a monster storm, and that sudden change of path that the storm took up toward New York is suspicious of some weather manipulation. So could they have done this to cover their tracks? Maybe. I don't know. I have no evidence for that one way or the other, but it's an interesting coincidence that this occurs. Now, a final point that I want to bring to your attention is an article from Op-Ed News concerning a $43 trillion lawsuit that has been filed in federal district court. And I want to read one crucial section of this article to you, just to show you what's going on. And then I'm going to try and connect these three different stories together. The lawsuit alleges serial violations of the United States Patriot Act, the policy of embargo against Iran and countries hostile to the foreign policy of the United States, and the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, commonly known as the RICO statute, and other state and federal laws in the district court lawsuit. Spire Law Group, on behalf of the homeowner across the country and New York taxpayers, as well as under other taxpayer recompense laws, has expanded its mass tort action into federal court in Brooklyn, New York, seeking to halt all foreclosures nationwide, pending the return of the $43 trillion by the banksters and their co-conspirators, seeking an audit of the Federal Reserve and audits of the bailout programs by an independent receiver such as Neil Barofsky, former Inspector General of the TARP, or the Troubled Asset Relief Program, who has stated that none of the TARP money and other bailout money advanced from the Treasury has ever been repaid, despite protestations to the contrary by defendants, as well as similar protestations by President Obama and the Obama administration, both publicly on national television and more privately to the United States Congress. Because the Obama administration has failed to pursue any of the banksters criminally, and indeed is actively borrowing monies for Mr. Obama's campaign from these same banksters to finance its political aspirations, the national group of plaintiff homeowners has been forced to now expand its lawsuit to include racketeering, money laundering, and intentional violations of the Iranian nation's Sanctions and Embargo Act by the national banks included among the bankster defendants. The complaint, which has now been fully served on thousands of the banksters and their co-conspirators, make it irrefutable that the epicenter of this laundering and racketeering enterprise has been and continues to be Wall Street, and continues to involve the very banksters located there who have repeatedly asked in the past to be bailed out and to be bailed out in the future. This article goes on to note that it also lists U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder and the Department of Justice as being defendants in the lawsuit. Now, I think what all this spells, folks, is a growing worldwide awareness that there is deep, deep financial fraud within the Western system of finance. Now, I have my suspicions as to why and what the nature of that fraud may be. I'm writing about it in future blogs. I'll be writing about it in the forthcoming book. I think what we're looking at, again, is the exposure now of a vast hidden system of finance that has been in play for quite some time. And with moves by Germany, Ecuador, Venezuela, and other countries to recover their gold, plus there's another significant story I hope you remember that occurred a few weeks ago. China bought the International Gold Exchange in London. All right, so in other words, China is saying, we've had it, we're done. We want to know exactly what's going on. Now, I continue to note in all of these articles something else. there continues to be massive difference in the actual numbers of gold being reported. In some sources, like Der Spiegel in Germany, they're saying Germany's reserves are as high as 3,500 tons. Yet more recently in Zero Hedge, this number is quoted as being 1,500 tons. So in other words, the numbers for gold itself are being massively obfuscated, and I think we're going to discover as this story eventually unwinds that this whole system of obfuscating the numbers is itself a part of the fraud. It's my suspicion, it continues to be my suspicion, that the amount of gold may be 1 to 2 magnitudes higher than is actually being reported for reasons that I get into in the forthcoming book. If that be the case, if that gold were ever suddenly dumped on the market, the value of gold would collapse. And I think that we're looking at some other moves on the part of the central bankers that I'll be uh, blogging about hopefully in the next couple of weeks. But anyway, I wanted to bring those things to your attention. I'm deliberately avoiding commenting on the American elections because as I've said so many times, a vote for dummy crooks or Republicans, you're really voting for the same party, just two different versions, two different flavors, vanilla and chocolate, as it were. And, you know, that's not meant to be a racial slur. It's simply meant to be a comment on the fact that we're dealing with brands of the same product offered by the same company. And that's all really that we're talking about. Efforts to include a rainbow coalition such as the Democrats have utterly failed in the Republican Party, and in my opinion you're going to see that party kind of dissolve or go the way of the Whig Party. But anyway, I think we're facing some very, very serious problems here, folks, in the near future. We have a vastly over-hypothecated, fraudulent financial system. The central banks are refusing to even allow Germany to see its gold. So we're looking at some real problems in the near future. And I hope you'll stay with us. I intend to try and cover these stories as best as I can. And we'll see you on the flip side, everybody. God bless.